2, 1. There we go. We're on. 3 minutes after schedule, but not too bad. Welcome, everyone. I'm Richard Dolan, and
I'm Tracey. Welcome.
And this is Intelligent Disclosure. Happy to have you with us. It's been a really amazing month and a half, 2 months, year, 2 years in ufology.
This week, though, has been crazy.
Yeah, it's been very, very busy. So it's we've been on top, very much on top of everything going on in the, let's call it the so-called Davis-Wilson leak. This is the explosive 15-page document that I think it's fair to say everyone in ufology has now been talking about for the last several weeks. I didn't truly break the story officially, but I guess it's fair to say about a week and a half ago, it was my live stream on YouTube that really blew it open. The documents had been circulating for about a full 24 hours, but then I basically just sort of outed them in a more significant way, and we've been talking about them. So there's still a lot to talk about. I've noticed that there's, we haven't really kept track of every argument and debate going on, but there's a lot of naysayers, or at least loud naysayers. I don't know if there's many of them. We can come back to those a little later. All I'm just going to say is the people who are really adamantly opposed to the validity of these documents, you can talk yourself into irrelevancy and oblivion all you like, because you're on the wrong side of this one. We have a lot to say. There's new information we'll be talking about as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think so. If there are people joining who don't know what's going on, and we're going to launch into this again, and you want to get caught up, you probably want to watch the last 2 Saturday shows that Richard did. They're called Big Picture. Mm-hmm. You'll see those. And we sort of discussed it a little bit more on this show last week. So if you want to get up, those are 3 good episodes to 3 good episodes to watch.
Intelligent Disclosure last week. And,
that's right.
Absolutely, we got into it.
Of course, there's lots of other people talking about it, but that's what we've put out so far.
I should add that I try, and I usually am able to do article versions of all of my Saturday live streams.
Right.
And I have those available as well on Richard Dolan members. They're free for anyone to read. You just go to Richard Dolan members, and you'll see 2 very long articles on this subject. And so that, if you would prefer to read rather than go through the YouTube, not a bad place to start as well. Mm-hmm. So
we're going to talk about some of the news this week and then get back into the documents.
Yeah, let's do very quick news. We can come back to the news as well, but we can jump into it because there is a lot going on.
Yeah, so just so people know what we're going to try and cover, we're going to cover what's going on right now. Just a couple things we've noticed. One of those is what Trump just said. And we're going to talk a little bit because episode 3 of Unidentified came out. We'll probably get to that at the end of the show. And we're going to talk a little bit more, as Richard said, about this leak, the leaked documents.
Yeah, there's still more new information that we're going to get into.
Yeah, this has really got some momentum. So
do you want to start with Trump's thing?
Yeah, let's start with Trump's thing. So
fine.
I'm sure everyone saw that Trump talked about UFOs for the first time. So, this is pretty big news. He didn't really say that much, but when I went and searched for the quote today, even though I had seen this the other day.
Should we probably pull up this headline?
Well, no, hold on.
Okay.
I noticed that they had taken out, most sources had taken out the second part of what he'd said. So, the first part, do you believe in this? He's like, no, not particularly. And that was it. But really,
let's share this.
Yeah, now we can put this up.
So this was Fox. And this is probably like a lot of other news outlets. So Trump says he was briefed on Navy sightings of UFOs. Do I believe it? Not particularly.
Right. So you go down the article and they are, basically blowing out that part of what he said. But the second part was kind of interesting, too, because he actually said, I got to put my glasses on here. They asked him, do you think you'd know if there were evidence of extraterrestrials? And he said, our great pilots would know. And some of them really see things that are a little different than in the past. So, I think he was surprised by the question, of course, but it's kind of significant that he's saying he would, believe the Navy pilots. So
yeah,
interesting that part
he wasn't blowing them off.
No, he wasn't blowing them off.
I think they've seen something.
Yeah.
Kind of different than in the past, whatever that means. What does that even mean?
Yeah, well, right. I
But
think that
it's-
was just him sort of yammering
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
But, this is kind of indicative of what's going on in the general conversation these days outside of the community. We had a neighbor come up to us today and say, hey, did you guys hear about the Navy pilots? And I thought,
Yeah, right.
there you go.
Out of the blue.
This is becoming part of the main discussion, mainstream discussion. So I did not expect that we would be here this soon, but here we are.
Yeah.
So the other thing we were going to show you, when I was looking at that Trump article, there was a video in it, and we watched it. This was just a little while ago, and we found this pretty interesting and thought we'd share it.
Got some screenshots. We don't really have much of an ability to play the videos here, but I screenshotted it, and you can just see. So this is the video. This is on Fox. Kind of amazing. So they they basically give you a bunch of their own screenshots, essentially. So the U.S. Navy is drafting new guidelines for pilots to report encounters with unidentified aircraft. Of course, this was all out back in April, as you remember, if you've been following this. But this is a nice little series of graphics that they put together for this. The new effort comes in response to more sightings of unknown advanced aircraft flying into, what does that say, or near Navy strike groups. And these nice pictures of flying saucers in the background. There have been a number of reports of unauthorized and or unidentified aircraft entering various military-controlled ranges and designated airspace in recent years. That's a U.S. Navy statement. What's interesting is this: you've got a mainstream news outlet giving this. And look at this ET picture. Intelligence officials recently revealed that research into obscure topics like UFOs, wormholes, and what is that?
Alternate dimensions was funded by the U.S. government.
Yeah, and I think, is that the last?
I was a little surprised to see this, I got to say.
And then the last one: for safety and security concerns, the Navy and the Air Force take these reports very seriously and investigate each and every report. So, yeah, how about that? So they're putting that right out there for us.
Well, I got to say, I'm surprised.
No, it is surprising. I mean, everything's moving so fast in our society these days that we're almost taking this for granted. But the fact is, even 2 years ago, I think we would have been shocked to have mainstream coverage dealing with this. So clearly things are changing. Now you've got people arguing it's an op, it's disinformation. I would say there's spin involved at all times on this, and we're going to get into that. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, for years and years, people involved in the UFO research field have wanted to see UFOs being taken more seriously by the mainstream, and so it's happening. It is definitely happening. So that's an important thing to note.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So we can come back to some of that. We probably.
Well, I also just wanted to say, moving into the leaked documents, a lot has changed this week as well, because you have a lot of the prominent researchers from the field starting to come forward to support these documents and add in what they can. So, for example, Grant Cameron has come in, Linda Moulton Howe is weighing in, Dr. Stephen Greer is weighing in, Keith Basterfield, Paul Dean, who am I forgetting?
Right, out of Australia. Well, both of those guys are very important. Basterfield's a very long-standing experience. I would say conservative, rigorous scientific UFO researcher. Mm-hmm. He's got a blog that is quite active with that, and he has been following this development very carefully as well. And he seems to have concluded that the leaked documents are genuine, but also he was really the first one publicly to go into the direction that they seemed likely to have come from the files of the late Edgar Mitchell. Right. Which, absolutely, yes, that's definitely the consensus of all of us. And then Paul Dean, I didn't hear Paul's direct statement. Paul Dean is one of the most incredibly knowledgeable, detail-oriented document experts that we have in the UFO field. He's in Australia. And Paul, I'm only going secondhand, but apparently he did an interview and said, these, he argued that he believed they were genuine as well, which they are genuine. So, but there's a lot of people coming in. I've had I mentioned this, I think I said this on Saturday, but I had a very prominent mainstream researcher tell me privately that they knew the documents were genuine because they also were shown them as some number of years ago by an impeccable source. So there's another person. Whether this individual will come out or not is up to them. But they're all coming in, sometimes behind the scenes, sometimes out front. There's a lot going on. And now we've got, I had a very interesting conversation with a researcher yesterday who provided me with a statement. Do you want to introduce that?
I was going to, but I was just going to say first, there's really these two camps, right? There's the camp, like we are continuing the conversation, working and discussing the authenticity of the documents.
Right.
And then there's the other part of the conversation of, that is the most important. What would this mean? What are these documents really saying? And what are the implications? So we're going to speak to both of those. But
yeah, exactly. Are they authentic? What's the argument? Or at least is there any new evidence to add to that? And assuming they're real, what does it mean?
Right. So at the end of this, I asked Richard, I want your top 5 takeaways from this. So
right, we'll do that
he can share with everyone. But first of all, let's bring up, Davis, everybody's been saying that Davis has been giving a no comment, but you have recently received something else.
Yeah, not from Dr. Eric Davis himself. So let's just back up. So these notes are purportedly from Dr. Eric Davis from 2002. He had a meeting with Admiral Thomas Wilson, who had been at one point head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Intelligence Directorate, and then later head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. We're talking late 90s. And then the DIA thing for Wilson was from 99 to 02. Wilson left that, and in 02 has a meeting with Davis, and he sit in the back of Wilson's car for over an hour. Mm-hmm. Davis is taking either copious notes or maybe recording, probably taking notes, don't know. Comes out with, a lot of pages of notes, and it describes how Wilson is telling him, yes, back in 97, I met with, there was a meeting, me, 2 other high-level individuals. Dr. Stephen Greer came in with Dr. Edgar Mitchell of Apollo 14, Lieutenant Commander Will Miller, and a few other people. And essentially, Greer did this briefing. Mm-hmm. This is Stephen Greer's briefing. Mm-hmm. And, if you followed anything that Greer was about in the 90s particularly, he was absolutely making the rounds in D.C., getting meetings with all kinds of people. And all about ostensibly, look, you guys have to get control over a runaway, privatized, illegal black budget system that is dealing with, reverse engineering alien tech, alien bodies, and the like.
Yeah,
that's a really radical thing to be doing, particularly in the 90s. And Greer was doing this, and he's got Mitchell along for the ride. He's got Will Miller along for the ride, and they get this meeting in April of 1997. And this all happened. Like, there's no debating if the meeting happened. Every one of the participants is saying it happened.
I'm just going to say Stephen Greer was on Jimmy Church last night if you want to hear more about that.
Yeah, and he had a lot to say.
He had a lot to say.
We'll come back to that, too.
Okay.
We will come back to that. So anyway, that's the setup. And then the notes state that in the aftermath of that meeting, Wilson and Miller, because they're Navy officers, had a 2-hour one-on-one in which Wilson stated, they talked about crash retrievals, UFOs, alien bodies, and the like. And then in the rest of the notes, Wilson is telling Davis about his subsequent efforts to get access to this program and utterly failed, even though he had the proper legal authority to do so, to oversee them, but legal authority meant nothing, and he was denied access. He did not have a need to know. And the famous, it's now a famous quote where he's describing technology not made by man, not by human hands. So it's extraterrestrial technology. So that's the tenor of the notes. It's 15 pages. If you're getting this for the first time, go back over our previous live streams, go to Richard Olin Members, read the articles.
The last 3 videos, essentially.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the notes. So So it comes out, and of course, Eric Davis is in the center of the storm here, and he's issuing one no comment after another, apparently. However, we have a statement, and I did not get this statement. This comes from my colleague and friend, James Iandoli. I want to talk about this in a minute. But first, it has to do with this.
We need to give the setup.
I want to give you the setup for this. This is a snapshot of Luis Elizondo appearing on Tucker Carlson. This is only two and a half weeks ago. This is May 31st, 2019, where this is just for the premiere of the TV series Unidentified.
Mm-hmm.
Elizondo gets a spot on Fox. Carlson interviews him. Tucker Carlson, by the way, by far is the best mainstream person on UFOs these days. Like, he's clearly into it, and he asks fantastic questions of Elizondo in this interview. Very impressive that you have a mainstream guy asking the questions that Carlson does. In any case, I copied some of this as a transcript, so I just want to read this to you. This is where really they get into it. So this is toward the end of the interview. It's only 5 minutes. They all are. Carlson says, so do you believe, based on your decade of serving in the U.S. government on this question, that the U.S. government has in its possession any material from one of these aircraft? He says aircraft, but they're talking about UFOs. And Elizondo has this pause, and he says, I do, yes. So he's saying that the U.S. government has it in its possession, material from a UFO. Carlson pauses, and he restates it. He says, you think the U.S. government has debris from a UFO in its possession right now? And Elizondo says, unfortunately, Tucker, I really have to be careful of my NDA. That's my non-disclosure agreement. I really can't go into a lot more detail than that. Carlson says, okay. Elizondo then says, but simply put, yes. So he's saying, and that was really the end of the interview. So as a result of that, talking just yesterday with James Iandoli, who, by the way, is an amazingly motivated, smart, plugged in like in the sense that his research is outstanding in UFOs. He's only in his 30s, and he's absolutely on top of this. I'm so impressed by his motivation. So Iandoli was able to contact Eric Davis at that time. This is less than 3 weeks ago. All right. And so as a result of that, he gets this very carefully managed quote from Davis, and I'm going to show it to you now. James put this slide together. Whoops. Here we go. This is it. And this is Eric Davis on the night of May 31st, June 1st. It's like a little after midnight, according to James. He says, Luis Elizondo's very brief answer to Tucker Carlson's question about whether the U.S. government is in possession of recovered, crashed, and landed UFO technology hardware is 1,000% accurate. My national security NDAs prevent me from adding any further comment on this. And by the way, James's YouTube site is called Engaging the Phenomenon. I would certainly recommend you check that out. So that's Davis's quote to James. And what James pointed out, he says Davis was very careful. He said he actually re-edited it and reworked it to add in landed UFO. Like, it was originally, right, I think, crashed UFO, mm-hmm, but he added in recovered and crashed and landed, mm-hmm, UFO technology. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting.
Right.
Because if you go to page 13 of the Davis-Wilson notes here.
I feel like we're all in a briefing right now. Okay, turn to page 13.
Turn to page 13. Yes, that's right. So at the top of that page, all right, here's Wilson telling Davis they had a program manager talking, a craft, an intact craft they believed could fly. And then Davis in questions mark, space, air, water, dimensions. And then, it's clearly they're saying it's not terrestrial. But the fact is, an intact craft they believed could fly. So I would like to just pause on that for a minute. It's very obvious, okay? Davis, in his answer on June 1st, is thinking explicitly about those notes he wrote all those years before. That in this deep black program, they had an intact craft. So that's not a crash necessarily. It's and it's also interesting that he said they believed could fly. So it gives you the impression they had it and they didn't know how to fly it, right? That they hadn't taken it out for a spin, as it were.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was Davis's quote to James Iandoli, which was authorized. That's according to James. Davis said, "Yep, you can use it." So.
And then you also had the no comment from Hal, but Hal's was very interesting. It's probably the most detailed no comment I've ever seen.
Yeah, let's show it. So I've got this, and I
So
showed this again the other day. On June 12th, I was corresponding with Hal Puthoff about this, asking questions, as I always like to do. Whenever I get a chance, I'll write to some of these guys. And this is what he says to me. This is his no comment statement, which I've already shown, but I want to show you here again. This is from June 12th, so just a few days ago. He says, "Rich, with regard to authenticity, we have no comment on the documents recently being circulated. We have no comment, as some of us still retain U.S. government security clearances and remain bound by the secrecy oaths we have taken. We believe it is in the best interest of the United States government and ourselves not to comment on any documents that purport to describe classified U.S. government programs or informations." So there you go. That's his statement on that. And yeah, you're right. Like, that's one of the most detailed no comment statements you're going to find.
You got to read it a couple times, and then when you do, you start to feel like,
yeah, look, first of all, it's not a denial.
it's interesting. Yeah.
He's not saying no. He's not even just saying no comment. He's giving a no comment with a very detailed, very carefully worded explanation, which, by the way, Linda Moulton Howe told us earlier today, he sent her a nearly, I think it was an identical no comment. So she'll probably publish hers.
When you could just say no comment.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Which is what Davis did say earlier, but here's Hal Puthoff providing, it's a little part of the trail of breadcrumbs, it seems to me. He's just dropping these little bits of information out there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Can we talk about Edgar Mitchell? Because really, this is all boiling down to Edgar Mitchell. Before, we all want to know, where were these documents coming from? So can we now say these documents did come from Edgar Mitchell?
I would say yes. I would say we can definitely say that. I think I was chatting with was it with Jimmy Church the other day, and he says, "So is this officially from Mitchell?" And I think this is an off. Yeah, we were just on the phone, and I said, "Well, what's official? Like, this is, Mitchell's gone; he can't talk for them, and there's no one in his family speaking for them." But yes, I mean, it's very obvious the consensus has formed. Like, it's obvious because here's the thing: you've got the story of how these files got out. And I just want people to understand, I don't have the whole story of this. And I don't know if I'll ever get the whole story of this, because the way that they came out, you've got people wanting to protect themselves, not because they did anything illegal, but, folks should understand not everyone wants a whole lot of publicity.
Right.
So if someone
especially this publicity.
No, right.
Right.
So
it's very alternative.
That's right. But clearly there was someone who was able to get these documents legally, who felt that they were important not to be either destroyed or hidden away or whatever, and was able to get a certain amount of these documents. And no one knows exactly how much, but enough got out. And I don't know who that person is. I know James Rigney. James Rigney is the next person in line.
Who got them from
the original source of these. That's right. So that's how it's working out. Now, from James Rigney, a number of other people, I mean, obviously Grant Cameron, which Grant talked about just yesterday in an interview. He's been very upfront about this. Grant learned about these documents from James at a conference in November of 2018. This is Paola Harris's Star Works USA conference.
Right.
And James, just as the conference was ending, James finds Grant just before he goes back to the hotel and gets him to look at the documents. And Grant, again, just last night in his interview, was saying, yeah, like when I saw them instantly, I realized, like he said, I didn't even want to talk to this guy because I was on my way out.
Yeah, right.
He shows me the documents and everything stopped.
Yeah.
Like he knew immediately. So he's the name Oak Shannon, which is not a name that most people are going to be familiar with, but Grant knew. And he got his attention. And from there he was in, and that got him going. But Rigney, and I don't know who else he's been in communication with, but other people. So the documents circulated around for a few months.
Right.
We finally got them in April because you were paying attention to the emails and you actually saw them. Otherwise, I wouldn't have seen them. So, but they were sending them out very quietly. And, you know, when they came to me, my main concern was simply, I want to study these and I want to make sure that these are what they purport to be. And didn't take me long, to be honest with you.
Right.
So, but anyway, back to the Mitchell connection. So Grant Cameron just did another document release yesterday on his Facebook page. Let me just show folks a screenshot of that. Here we go. So it's, I mean, actually, it's not a real screenshot. It's Grant. There's Grant's Facebook icon, and I just put, I pasted in the 3 documents. If you really want to read these, go to Grant's page. You can download the documents there in high res, but this is page 1, and I'll just show you pages 2 and 3. What you're talking about here is a document, there's page 2, from Robert Bigelow to Edgar Mitchell. And it's from 1996. And the information in this is not explosive per se, but it's interesting. And it talks about the agenda for upcoming NIDS meetings, board meetings that Mitchell was attending, and then a number of other people were attending, and it kind of lays it out. What makes it interesting is actually Keith Basterfield did a really interesting analysis of this, very detailed, and he pointed out in one of Valet's books, he references that exact information. So it all makes sense. In other words, what you're looking at is a letter that went out from Bigelow to all of the attendees of this particular meeting. And what we're looking at here is simply Edgar Mitchell's copy. So Grant dropped it really just to show, look, here's another of the documents coming from. You want to guess whose these files are from? They're from Edgar Mitchell's files, obviously. And the story, of course, that we have gotten from James Rigney is, yes, these are absolutely obtained. Again, I want to emphasize legally, upfront, with the knowledge of the family of Edgar Mitchell. So all of that is above board. The individual who has them simply doesn't want to be identified. So, and what the real question is like, how much more is there?
Right.
So, you know, Grant's got some. How much more does he have is a really good question. I don't know. You don't know.
No.
A lot of people do not know the answer to that. So, so there you go. One thing it might be helpful to mention, Grant did this interview yesterday on Dave Scott. And I mean, overall, he was very clear. He's very good. But Grant said to me, and also James Rigney pointed out, there were a couple of details Grant did not get correct in his own telling of the provenance of the documents, at least in the exact nature, some of the specifics. So I don't have all those details, but James wanted to get that out there. Grant actually also said to me privately that, oh yeah, I guess I got one or two things a little off there. So it just shows even Grant doesn't get it all exactly. Like when you're telling these stories, there's a lot of details, and when you're not there, you're not going to know, and you may get certain things wrong. But anyway, the fundamental fact is, it is correct. These were obtained through Mitchell's files. Right. So.
Okay. So there you go.
That's right.
There you go. So, what about Greer on Jimmy Church last night?
Yeah, that was interesting. So I haven't heard all of that. There's some very, very good citizen out there who did a nice breakdown of the interview, gave a description of it. Thank you, good citizen, for doing that. It was very helpful. I did talk to Jimmy Church about it earlier today. He gave me a kind of a little debriefing of the, and you
listened to, yeah. I didn't listen
to
to the entire thing, but it was very good. It was very good. And I definitely encourage people to listen to it because it gives a lot of background and context that helps with this story, helps blow it out.
So basically, the one thing you want to know, like, what does Stephen Greer have to say about Will Miller? Miller has issued a denial about having written the 2-page letter, or supposedly a denial. Is it really a denial?
Glad you're bringing this up.
He said, well, it looks like a cut and paste, I think he said, of my letters. Seriously, like, that's a very coherent letter. For his part, Greer did say, this is exactly like every other Will Miller letter. Like he said, I've seen hundreds of his letters because they've known each other since the early 90s.
Yeah.
They're friends. And Greer says, from the looks of it to me, this looks absolutely authentic.
Yeah.
So there's that. But, you know, I mean, Greer had a lot of other interesting things to say about this, I thought, frankly.
Yeah.
You know, he gave a lot of detail of his meeting with Wilson. You know, reminding the world that he was the one who did the briefing, which, yeah, that was his whole thing there. Pointing out that Wilson was taking this very seriously.
And that he was taking it very hard, that he was denied access.
Right. Well, that was after the fact.
Yes.
That was after the fact. But yes.
He was talking about this in the interview. Yeah.
Right. So Greer, Stephen Greer had a lot to say about this. I think it's worth at least knowing what he had to say about that. Did you want to say anything else about that from your own observation?
I had written some quotes from him, but I don't think we really need to go into it if we want to try and keep this shorter tonight, because we still want to go into some other areas here.
I'd like to share again, this has to do with Miller and a statement that he made with Stephen Greer in 2013. Again, I think I discussed this on Saturday, but I really want to come back to it. It's kind of important. So there's a YouTube video, and the title of that video is right at the top of your screen, Dr. Stephen Greer and retired Commander Willard Miller. Go find that on YouTube by all means. So part of the interview is a back and forth between Miller and Greer, and Miller says here, he's talking about the 1997 briefing. The Admiral took this briefing with the same level of gravity and interest as he would any other national security intelligence matter. So when folks say that the military is not interested in this subject, he's talking about UFOs here, it's obviously not the case and has not been our experience. And then Greer says, he says, no. And in fact, I remember we were slotted for a certain amount of time, and he kept turning to his aides saying, cancel this, cancel that. He kept extending because he had tremendous interest in all this. And Miller says, yes. It was also a little interesting aside as I was leaving. He said, the Admiral's aide turned to me and said that, you know, the subject of Majestic MJ-12 came up, and there's been a lot of debate as to whether that's real or ever existed. And he said, we know it exists. We here at the Intelligence Directorate for the Joint Chief just don't have a need to know what they do. And Miller says, I found that to be a very interesting statement. So now, I mean,
indeed.
I mean, here's the thing. Miller in this interview with Greer, this is only 6 years ago.
Right.
No one's talking about the Davis notes, the Wilson notes, because they hadn't been leaked. So Miller's not going to say, oh, yes, I met with Wilson for 2 hours after the fact. He already burned Wilson once by talking to Greer about this, and Wilson got back and he was very upset about it. But he does say, like, he can't leave it alone. So he's in this interview with Greer, and he says, yeah, we talked about MJ-12, and the Admiral's aide told us it's real, and we don't have a need to know. So he's clearly visiting the topic in this interview. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting audio clip for sure. And, you know, I guess I'll just emphasize again, this, you know, if someone is not on board with all of what's going on here, I would definitely recommend an article. This came out just as all of this was busting out, and it's an article by Juliana Markovich. Sorry, Juliano Markovich. And this is an unbelievably comprehensive, thorough chronology of every reference that was made to this 1997 briefing by everyone. I'm in there quite a bit. Edgar Mitchell's in there quite a bit. Stephen Greer's in there quite a bit. Anyone, especially in the early years, the three of us were the main three who really were talking about this. I didn't learn about it until the end of 2006. I started talking about it almost immediately. Giuliano found, I was shocked, he found like every single one of my public statements that I think I mentioned where I talked about it. So that's a very, very interesting document. I would encourage anyone to go there. So, yeah, and then, just I mentioned a number of private and researchers have come to me. So some of them, one in particular, very prominent.
Mm-hmm. Don't want to be known.
They do not want to be known.
Not at this time, yeah.
But, there are folks who don't always agree.
That's right.
So you got people calling it hoax.
Yeah. So
people calling it disinfo. What do I think?
What do you think?
I think you've got...
I know there's all these people out there going, wanting Richard to answer to this. So what do you think?
It's hoax, it's disinfo. So I haven't really followed all of the arguments out there. But some of them become known to me. Mm-hmm. Like people are writing to me, like so-and-so's attacking you, so-and-so's after you, this person's after you. And I'm like, wow, really? Whose dogs have I run over that I'm not aware of? There's a lot of people very angry about this.
Yeah.
Fine, So what I'm getting is that there are a bunch of different schools of thought that are opposed to the validity of this in one way or another. And from my perspective, all of them are ideologically driven. This is my take on it.
Okay.
So they may not agree, but I think that they're all ideologically driven. So you've got the UFO skeptics. So there's an ideology there. This can't be real. The documents therefore must be a hoax. They can't be genuine. You've got the ET skeptics, the interdimensional hypothesis people, and there's a number of them over in the UK and in the US, and they are definitely a number of them are very critical and skeptical of this, and I think this is all a big mistake. They also, I think, are very ideologically driven in this case because they have a certain perspective that they feel like this is what UFOs are, not the ET stuff, not the crash retrievals. That's all nonsense.
So they're saying they're interdimensional, but they're not ET necessarily?
Correct. Right, exactly. You've got a certain number of let's call the secret space 20 and back.
Both.
Well, yeah, right.
I mean, do we really know?
Well, no. And I think, I like what you just said, because that's not an ideologically driven statement. You're keeping a much more of an open mind here. But there are people who've got a very, very, they're ideologues. You see them in society in general, and you see them within the UFO field. You've got the secret space 20 and back crowd, who also, some of them I think are very openly critical of this, because this narrative clearly throws what they're saying kind of out the window in a lot of ways. Like it really definitely takes away from the Hollywood fantasy aspects of the phenomenon that some of them have been pushing. And then you got the false flag people, the people who'll say like anything coming out, anything connected with the intelligence community in any way is basically a false flag, disinformation. These are the anti-TTSA people. There's a number of them out there who are very ideologically driven as well, in my view. And I think, look, there's a lot of folks out there in love with their own theories. They've fallen in love with an idea, whether it's UFOs are interdimensional or whether anyone who ever touches the CIA is therefore a liar for the rest of all time and has got a false flag agenda. There's people who are in love with the whole Werner von Braun scenario. Can I talk about this for a second?
Please talk about this.
All right. This is overdue.
And,
Tracy's heard me talk about this.
Yes, this has come up a lot.
I think Jimmy Church heard me talk about this in a private conversation. So all of this comes from Dr. Carol Rosin, who a person that I know, I happen to like. On more than one occasion, I had a genuine heart-to-heart conversation with Carol Rosin. I respect her. And I also believe her when she talks about her story about having, in Werner von Braun's last years, we're talking mid to late 1970s, she worked for him And he liked her, and he confided certain things in her. I have no reason not to believe Carol on any of this. And, you know, famously back in the 2001 press conference with Stephen Greer, Carol was there,
Mhm.
and she talks about the Werner von Braun story. And she just said, look, you know, toward the end of his life, he said, Carol, you know, the elites, the secret keepers, you know, I forget exactly what the first they're going to, you know, scare you with the Russians, and they're going to scare you with terrorists, and then they're going to scare you with extraterrestrials.
Right.
All right. So that's been the statement. And that statement, now when she gave it in 2001, it was already 25 years old as a prediction.
Right.
Now,
also, you said he said this to her in the last few years of his life. I don't know what his...
he died in 1977.
Okay.
So
I don't know what his state was like over that time, but...
What he was like, well, you know, I think he was very much in his right state of mind right up to the end. But the point is this. It's been another 20 years since that statement, by the way. It's 18 years. So we're approaching the 50-year mark from this Werner von Braun prediction. I just want people to realize. Here's my question. So let's say von Braun told us to Carol Rosin. Had he been formally briefed?
Right.
By the CIA or the Pentagon? Had he been informally briefed? Had he been just in a conversation with a couple of guys and this is what he inferred? Or was he just giving her his own personal opinion?
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, I mean, or some other variation of that. Who really knows? Just because it comes out of the mouth of even someone like Werner von Braun doesn't make it gospel. What's happened in our community here is that some people take this, it's like religious dogma now. Thou shalt never question this. Well, let me tell you, it's been 45 plus years since he's made this statement, or about 45 years. How many more decades are going to pass before people start to think, maybe it's not going to happen the way he planned it? To predict a 50-year trajectory for any false flag. I've studied a lot of false flags. To plan this out for 50 years, are you kidding me? Like, get real here. You know, you look at the Bilderberg group, and they've got a trajectory, like they're able to do it. But I'm not aware of a single 50-year Bilderberg trajectory. You know, when they planned out the formation of the European Common Market back in the first Bilderberg meeting in 1954, we're talking a couple of years.
Right.
When they foresaw the post-Soviet era in one of their meetings, I think it was 1983 in their minutes, that was pretty good. But that's not 50 years either. You know, I mean, they're definitely moving to plan the future world, no question about it. But a 50-year timeline is pushing it. So I guess what I'm just saying to people is you've got these folks now saying, I mean, this is really more directed against TTSA than against necessarily these leaks. But these leaks concern some of the same people.
Right.
Puthoff, primarily. Davis and Kit Green are part of these various leaks, and they're associated indirectly with TTSA. So you got people saying it's a hoax, it's disinfo. This is a Pentagon-inspired leak to make you go running to the national security apparatus for protection from the evil ETs. And all of us, you hear this all the time. I would just say this. Do not let your ideology, your love affair with this idea prevent you from actually recognizing the data that's coming out. There's very important data coming out here. I mean, our society in general, we're so polarized now. You got the left hating the right hating the left, and no one is listening to each other simply by virtue of the fact of who the other person is. All right, that's a bad road to go down. All right, we do not as a society want to go down that road politically as a society, and we're seeing it in a microcosm in the alternative field here. So people are being judged based on who they are, who their associations are, who their connections are, rather than what they're trying to do, or whether what they're trying to say and what they are doing. So, and they're allowing themselves to be jaded without really a full analysis of these documents. Mm-hmm. I mean, you want to criticize TTSA, be my guest, but that has nothing to do with these documents. I read one really benighted comment under Grant's post the other day. I don't know where these people come from. This guy said, well, obviously Bigelow wanted this latest leak to happen. Because what? Bigelow controls every single thing in the universe. Like, who are these people?
I think some people are just jumping in and trying to understand, and then they're jumping to conclusions, and they're not taking the time to get all the information. So I think a lot of that shows up in social media when people are posting. And then on the other hand, there are a lot of people who are going through everything, and they are trying to form full informed opinions.
Right, but there are people out there who are, it's one thing to be critically minded, it's another thing to be suspicious, and then there's another thing just to be so paranoid that you prevent yourself from actually reading the information that's right there in front of you. For years and years and years, UFO community, UFO researchers have been dying to see some insider or another leak information out.
Right.
Like they've been desperate for it. And finally it happens, and you've got a whole group of people throwing rotten eggs at them. Like, what more do you want? The information is being handed on a silver platter. Like, take the win. Now, it doesn't mean that there's no spin here. Of course there's spin. The whole TTSA crowd, I mean, this is a little different here from the leaks.
Right.
But they're saying, well, Elizondo on his Tucker Carlson thing, he's also saying, like, well, we don't really know what they are. Yeah, sure you don't. Of course you know what they are. All right. So there's definite level of not being forthcoming about what they damn well know.
Right, which we've talked about many times, our opinion on.
So the thing is, and are they out to make money? Well, they're idiots if they're not trying to make some money, so that's their right. But the question is, are they putting genuine information out there? Well, the answer is yes, they absolutely are putting genuine information out there. We would have next to nothing on the 2004 Tic Tac encounter. I mean, that was discussed on Above Top Secret in 2007, but no one was really paying attention.
Right.
The 2014, 2015 sightings off the East Coast, we wouldn't have any of that. So there's definitely information that's come out. And generally, like, we have our landscaper from next door talking to us about the Navy. That's all TTSA. That's
right.
All of it.
Yeah.
All of it.
I mean, this is really getting through to the public, and with Unidentified. Right. We were planning on going into that a little bit later, so I don't know if we want to go there yet. But I
just want to mention one more thing here. Mm-hmm. When I didn't want to get into TTSA just yet, because I want to get back to the implications of the note of Davis's note. But I just want to say this one thing. Okay. So what you see in TTSA, they're the current incarnation of the aviary. Basically, it's the same group of people. The folks who gathered around John Alexander in the mid-1980s for his advanced theoretical physics group, who kind of became known as the aviary to certain UFO researchers, who then became basically Bigelow's private research team during the 90s and beyond. And now the latest iteration is to the Stars Academy. So, I mean, you get new guys coming in, old guys leaving, but it's really the same group. And they're really important to understand. And you've got some people saying that this is all part of a Pentagon op. And I strongly disagree with this. Like, I could not disagree more. And if there's any prominent, legitimate person out there who wants to discuss this with me, I'm more than happy to. So let's talk about this, and let's talk about this in an honest, open way. But the fact is, just see yourself as someone with a security clearance who wants this information out. So how do you do it? How do you navigate your way through the labyrinth of hostile factions within the national security community that don't want this out? How do you navigate your way through your own NDAs that you've signed, mm-hmm. that you are legally bound to uphold? How do you do all of that? It's a really tight box that you find yourself in. And yet what you see is a group of people winding their way through that. Now, someone gave them a green light, and it's worth finding out who gave them a green light. So there's a lot that we don't know, but you've got people out there making assumptions that this is some diabolical scheme to do a Werner von Braun Project Bluebeam false flag scenario.
Right.
The Bluebeam?
Yeah.
So no, and I'm not, I think the blue beam scenario is a fantasy. I wrote about this 10 years ago when there was a bunch of people in 2010.
Because we do get a lot of people asking about that.
Yeah, look, guys, get educated on blue beam. I mean, how many times are we going to go over this? I did a thorough analysis of the origins of Project Blue Beam 10 years ago. You know, it derived from the 1990s from a deceased Quebecois, man from Quebec named Gilles Monast, who back in those days, his Project Blue Beam had nothing to do with an alien invasion. Right. By the way, it had to do with the false second coming of Jesus. So if you want to talk about Blue Beam, get your facts straight and learn the history of the idea and how it morphed.
How did it get mixed in and mistaken
for
the Wernher von Braun story? I still don't know how that got mixed up, but it's so interchangeable out there, the way people are talking about it.
Well, Monast starts talking about this in the 90s, and he said, I have an associate at NASA who told me all about this. Like, NASA? Seriously? You live in Quebec. I don't even think you spoke any English, to be honest with you, and you got a buddy at NASA who tells you this. Sure you did. And the whole point was nothing to do with UFOs, aliens. It had everything to do with faking out the public with holographic projections of the second coming of Jesus. What is this man smoking? Like, seriously. And he gets attention. But yeah, after he dies in, I think it was in the late 90s, this is all worked into the Y2K thing back then as well. Like, everyone was saying Y2K is going to happen. And then, of course, Y2K didn't happen. Like, the civilization didn't collapse. And I don't know exactly who was the person. Like, there had to be one person who transitioned it from Jesus to aliens. We got to find that out. So if someone out there knows that, write it below. I want to see, or just contact us. But it did morph sometime shortly after 2000. You start seeing these references to UFO.
I just want to remind you, some people are coming into this in the last 10 years. You know, not everybody's been into this since you wrote about it 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, and there's a lot going on in the field. There is a lot to take in, a lot to navigate. So I just want to give you a little reminder.
Yes, indeed. Fair enough. So it's a little bit, it's too bad that you've just got to keep going this over and over again, like trotting this out again and again. The whole blue beam scenario. Look, false flags are real. UFO deception is real. A psych you out fake alien invasion in which some kind of holographic display happens to make you go right into the government. Look, there's better ways to create a 24/7 fascist state globally. It's already happening. You don't need an alien invasion to create that. They're already doing it. All right. So now let me just say this. If you roll out disclosure in such a way as to amp up public fear a little bit to make them come running to the state, yeah, that can happen. Like, that's what governments are always going to do. They're always going to be self-serving. So we have to look to any kind of official statements with a critical eye. But to do it with out-and-out paranoia, without really understanding the nuances of what's going on inside, I think doesn't help anyone. It just, it's not helpful.
Yeah, I mean, again, we could talk about this later, and but discounting everything that TTSA is doing because of this, I don't think is a good thing, because we have a genuine encounter here, and I'll just leave it because I do want to say some things about this.
They've made their missteps along the way. There's no question about it. Like, several of them were really done badly, but to call it an op, to call it disinfo, I just think get some perspective here. Do we want to talk about the 5 takeaways?
Please. Yes.
So what exactly did we want to
okay. So, so much of this is talking about the authenticity of the documents, but really this should be about what are they saying? What are the implications? So that's why I was asking Richard, like, give us your top 5 takeaways that we should be thinking about. And for those people who are really against it, let's just assume for a moment that they're authentic.
Good luck with that.
I know for a lot of people, there's going to be a problem with that.
For those folks,
but let's talk about this. What is being said?
Yeah. If you don't believe they're authentic, just hold your ears for about a couple of minutes here and you don't have to listen, or just fast forward. First, most important point here is what UFO researchers like myself and others have been saying for years. There is a black budget program to study ET tech, plain and simple. There is a black budget, special access, unacknowledged special access program, USAP, to study ET technology. How hard is that? This is the direct fundamental inside of those notes. They are detailed statement coming from Admiral Wilson through the notes of Eric Davis. And so there you go. Now, another important thing, let's say number 2, is that this program is privatized. Like probably 90+% of it appears to be privatized. That is, in the notes, you got Wilson talking about the list of who's in and who's out. The guys who are in, as far as he was able to tell, it seemed like it was completely dominated by private contractors. By the way, I think Greer did say in his interview that it was Lockheed Martin, didn't he? That was the main private contractor. I think he did.
I believe he did.
Yeah. And that's actually been the assumption of most of us who've been talking about this. But anyway, so it's the contractor and Skunk Works, basically. So they dominate. And by the way, Skunk Works is very well represented in TTSA, aren't they? Yes, they are. So it's not like the foxes are not in the hen house. Oh, they are. But you still have to listen to what they're saying here. They've got their motivations, but pay attention. So that's 2, it's privatized. 3, this program is beyond the formal control of normal legal, normal laws that we would expect to control it. So for example, Wilson, who is head of intelligence of the Joint Chiefs, by law of his position, should have had access to these programs, and he's denied access. And as it was stated in the notes, your legal ability to have access to this is irrelevant.
Right. And he's not only denied, he's threatened.
Yeah, he was, exactly. So we could say that that's 3.5. Like Wilson was warned off of this with his career. They said, we'll basically destroy your career. Well, you're going to lose a couple of stars. You'll get an early retirement. Forget about being director of the DIA. You're done. So that scared him. That also angered him. It's one of the main things that you keep getting recurring theme.
Yeah.
He gets angry in Davis's notes. Greer stated in this interview that Wilson was not just deeply interested, but he was angry over the status of things.
I want to read a quote from Greer here.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is him talking about Wilson here. He says, Wilson said this, that it was very chilling and he'll never forget it. As far as I'm concerned, this operation is illegal. It is not sanctioned. And if you and the people you are working with can disclose this information to the public, you have my blessing to do it. That's
Wilson talking to Greer, according to Greer in his interview last night.
I've gone as far as I can go, and I've been stopped. You have my blessing.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting that he said that. So
you can hear for yourself.
You
can hear for yourself on the interview that was done last night, again on Jimmy Church. But
well, this leads to my point number 4, actually, takeaway number 4, which is that people on the inside are having a hard time with this, and they don't really seem to know how to deal with it other than through very careful statements to private individuals and careful leaks from time to time. Like, that's definitely an impression you get. Look, over the years, I've talked from very, very time to time about a few conversations that I've been able to have with people at that level. And it's all the same. If they believe in the necessity of ending UFO secrecy, they're all stuck. Every one of them feels stuck. They don't know what to do. They don't, they're kind of howling into the wind here. And the best they can do is they'll talk to a researcher or two, and they carefully get this information out, and they don't want to trace back to them. It's like that's the death knell for their career if it does. So, yeah. And then the other, I guess the final takeaway, there's many of them, but is that you still have a large infrastructure trying to prevent this all from moving forward. People have got to understand we're not dealing with a monolithic power structure. No power structure ever is monolithic. Not ancient Rome with the civil war between Caesar and Pompey and Crassus, and not today. There's always factions wherever you go, and that definitely includes within the national security state, the national security community. So now this particular leak What I would say, let's talk about these no comments a little bit.
Okay.
And the denial, like Miller's denial and Puthoff's no comment and Davis's no comment. You can bet these guys they're embarrassed and they're a little bit nervous. So they're embarrassed over the fact that this leak occurred. Like, as far as they're concerned, they all have clearances. They all know how to keep secrets. And this is a secret that got out, and they're not happy. At least, maybe some of them are relieved.
I was just going to say, maybe they are.
But this is a real problem for them. Like, guys like Puthoff and Kit Green could conceivably have serious blowback against them. Because this is very sensitive information that's gotten out that, I think it was Grant Cameron who made the argument that those two may very well have held the longest top secret compartmented intelligence, clearances in the entire U.S. Intelligence structure since the early 70s. So that's a lot of years. And for this to come out, and they and a few other people are implicated in, were they being sloppy? This is the argument. So there's blowback that they might deal with professionally, which they're probably not happy about. So there's that. And then there's the, what's the other thing I just want to say? So I can't remember now. I'm losing my train of thought, but they're, the no comment. So there's professional and professional, and then there's the fear. So the professional fear and the embarrassment. So I think those are two reasons that they don't really know how to talk about it. And I suspect that they're waiting for this to play out, and then we'll see. Maybe there'll be a statement in a few months.
Right. It's not hard for me to imagine, if you were in this very high up position, you have this big NDA, you know these secrets, there's something really life-changing going on that you know about.
Right.
Whether they are interdimensional, extraterrestrial, you are holding on to a secret that some of those people, like some of you, are going to think everybody needs to know. This needs to get out, but you have to worry about the safety of your family. And you can't just speak about it. But imagine that moral dilemma and what you would do. Would you just sit on it and, or would you?
Well, let me tell you a conversation I had way back. I talked to someone in this general community, okay, who said to me, it has been known to me for 10 years. I had this conversation in 2004. This is someone who knew since 94. So prior to this whole meeting, right? So however they learned. He said, it's been known to me for 10 years at a deeply classified levels. He said, so deeply classified that you who study this would be amazed at how compartmented this is. That he said, we have scientists who have in their possession alien technology, and he whispered, at least one alien body that I know about. Grant actually referenced this statement of mine in his interview last night, and he basically got it right. I said, so what did the body look like? That was my immediate question. And this person said to me, I didn't say that I saw the body directly. And this is an exact quote, guys, you can take this to the bank. It's been 15 years. I'll never forget it. He said, the data became known to me in such a manner with such individuals present that it was incontrovertible. Exact quote. So that's what you go on. And I mean, this individual trusted me with the information. There will be a day, as long as I outlive that individual, which I imagine, I'll reveal who it is one day. But I'm respecting who they are. I'm respecting their wish for privacy. So I don't know what made me say, so the reason I'm mentioning this here is in response to what you were saying. Like, how do you deal with this? How do you negotiate this? This same individual said to me, for years and years and years, I thought if I only knew for sure, that would change my life. And then I learned officially, and he said, it hasn't changed a thing. He said, what do I do with this information? Do I go to the New York Times and give them a list of the 10 or 12 or whatever number of people who've basically MJ12, if they've got all the information? Do I just tell them that? What good will that do? A, they won't publish it. B, if they did, all of it will get traced back to me, he said, and I'm out. I lose my clearances. This is the game they're all playing. So it's very interesting. They've all got to be ultra careful. And so this leak is very unwelcome, and it's unwelcome to the TTSA narrative. Very unwelcome. You know, they're playing this game like these are UAP. We don't know where they are. Maybe they're Russian and Chinese. Although you listen to Elizondo, and in his last interview with
they're
Tucker
not really
Carlson,
saying that anymore.
No, he's like, we know it isn't.
Yeah.
And they're just putting it out there. It's all public consumption.
Right.
But they are still playing this kind of fiction that, well, we don't know what they are. And this document, this leak, blows that out of the water and then some. Because it's saying, not only do you know what they are, not only is it ET tech, but you've got a runaway private system of secrecy that is totally rogue, totally out of control, which, people have got very polarized opinions about someone like Stephen Greer, but he was exactly correct saying this in the 90s. He was exactly correct. So this is another case where, don't judge people based on whether you like them or not, or whether they're on the other side of the fence or not. Just judge the information and take it on that basis. You'll be a lot further ahead in this game. So, all right, my 2 cents. Shall we move on?
Yes, we were saying we're going to do this in half an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
That didn't happen. I'm noticing it's already 9:10. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the show, because
Unidentified.
I'm not sure if everybody who's watching has seen it, and there are a lot of polarized opinions about this show. But I like to see how it's affecting the mainstream. My mother called me and said she saw it, and she really liked it, and she said she could understand it more. It was more direct.
Didn't you say she liked it more than
Ancient Aliens?
Ancient Aliens, right?
She did. She just felt it was to the point. It was direct, and she was following an investigation. She realizes she shouldn't, necessarily believe everything, but she can understand what's going on a little bit better. And it's kind of speaking to, the New York Times articles about the Navy pilots.
So it passed the mom test.
It passed the mom test.
There you go.
But again, that's just telling us that it is speaking to a larger audience.
Right.
And it is affecting the mainstream, which used to be important to this community. And I hope, it still is.
Yeah, right. I agree.
Because we were all talking about disclosure.
So can we talk about fear-mongering then? Because this is like the biggest complaint that I'm hearing, that they're engaging in fear-mongering on behalf of the Pentagon.
Yeah.
I just want to say this. So we both watched all 3 episodes.
We did. And by the way, we watched the third one last night, so it's fresh.
Yeah. Yesterday. Wow.
Was it yesterday?
So if I have to just be honest, if this is fear-mongering, and if you think this is fear-mongering, then you haven't gotten out very much in your life, because this is not scary stuff. You know what fear-mongering is? The whole Russia baiting, the whole Putin baiting, that's fear-mongering. The whole Iran stuff, which does smell a lot, very suspicious, by the way, very false flaggy, that's fear baiting, fear-mongering. But this, are you kidding me? Who's saying that this is fear-mongering? There's not a single thing. You have Kevin Day in episode 2 saying, if they're hostile, we're screwed. Right? I think that's the one thing. So yeah, he's saying what every single other military witness for the last 70 plus years has ever said, because they're military guys. This is how they think. Of course they're going to say that. And guess what? This is like every case that I've researched in my 2 volumes of UFOs in a national security state. You got military encounter, one after the next, of unknown objects invading sensitive airspace. What more do you want? So if that's fear-mongering, excuse us for reporting the facts. These are the facts. You've got objects invading sensitive airspace. And there are individuals in this world who are charged with defending national security. So to them, that's important.
It's very
I don't see how that is fear-mongering at all.
Right. So much is out there about what is wrong with this. So, I think let's talk about what is right with this, because we're just putting ourselves.
I can say one thing that's wrong.
Okay, go ahead.
Typical TV stuff.
Oh, yes. Okay, let's acknowledge that.
You got Elizondo in his car pretending we're going to go meet a new witness named Kevin Day, or we're going to meet a new witness named whoever. Like, first of all, they all know each other. Secondly, this is what TV producers always do to create drama and to create a sense of investigation. And that's all ridiculous, of course. So let's just get past that. The whole forced interview thing, it's okay. It's not, by creating this pretend investigation, you do diminish the story a bit because it's not real. It is forced. It's artificial. Like producers who do these shows on History Channel, they really ought to know better. It's like, just be real. Get into, handle the subject in a genuine way without creating this artifice, which they all do. So I think that does diminish, and I constantly wish they wouldn't do that.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, being more truthful about where we actually are with it would be a better approach. Right,
but they have to do this pretend investigation thing, this like reality TV feel for it, and it's always a bad idea. But I guess you talk to the producers about this, and they're all like, "Yeah, but guess what? People like it." So that's why they do it, or that's what they say.
They fit it into the TV shell of what sells and what gets views, of course.
But it's always just a little jarring to see it for me.
For sure.
All right, so now you want to talk about what you like.
Yeah, what's good about this? So, I think about all of the military personnel. So this past week we had Sean Cahill talking about his experience. He was up on the bridge and he saw all of these lights that were moving around and then they disappeared.
He was on the Princeton.
And he was deeply affected by this. But, he was saying there were 5,000 people on that ship. And, he was expecting that people were going to be talking about this because the radar operators would have seen it, pilots would have seen it. But instead, what he faced was, ridicule. And they made people aware in their evening debrief that if you spoke about this, they're going to make fun of you. They brought up this fake alien and everybody was laughing.
And he said that they didn't even have to sign secrecy statements on this. I think he made that statement.
I don't remember that.
I believe I remembered him saying that. So the whole thing was based on ridicule.
Yeah.
And it affected him. And you get the idea, like watching him, that I don't think this was faked. I think he was genuinely, deeply emotionally upset about all these years of having to keep this to himself.
For anyone who doesn't believe that, I just want to say, if you don't believe him, what about all of the other military personnel over all of the decades who have seen things like this and haven't been able to say anything? And all of a sudden, this show is here and it's giving voice and validation to all these people who have seen these things, and they have to walk around every day with this absolute secret that's changing their lives, and they're obsessed, knowing that something else is going on and their country, their planet is not acknowledging this. So
I think it's cathartic for a lot of these military people.
It's super isolating
to watch these types of witnesses,
that's
like Sean Cahill or Kevin Day or the others.
That's my point. It's backing up something that's been going on for a long time and they haven't been able to talk about. So, say all the bad things you want. This is really giving a voice to those people and who've been deeply affected by this. So people having sightings, people having encounters, people having experiences. I mean, this is a real thing going on.
Right.
And they don't really have anyone to talk to. And this is the first show that really comes out and speaks to that. So I think that's an amazing thing that this show is doing. I'm so with you on how they're handling it and like sort of the fake way they're doing the investigation. Yes, I agree. But for what it's doing for people who are having experiences, that is super, super important.
Yeah, it's basically, I like everything you said there. They're changing the public conversation on this as well.
Yeah.
And so you get a lot of these millions of people now watching it. And I think it's cathartic for a lot of them. One of the things that I've always commented on for years and years of this phenomenon is like you've got millions of people interacting with these UFOs. And they're doing it in the worst way possible, by themselves. They've got no one to talk to.
Right.
So you have this incredible sighting. It transforms your life. Sometimes it traumatizes you.
Right.
But no matter what, it's very important. and you've got really no one to talk to because there's a culture of ridicule that,
or you might lose your job.
Absolutely. So that's all there. So what we're seeing in the last year and a half fundamentally is that is changing in a significant way. And like we got to recognize like this change is an important change. We're not 100% there yet, but at least you could say in the middle of 2019, someone says they've seen a UFO. I think it's much less likely that they're going to be subjected to ridicule. You know, back in 2008, presidential candidate Dennis Kucinich was outed, as it were, for having seen a triangle back in the early 1980s, and they ridiculed him so much, like he was gone. Like that was the last you heard of Dennis Kucinich, despite the fact that he had two witnesses with him who supported the sighting.
Right.
And so that's only 11 years ago. It's not that long ago where people became absolutely ridiculed. And so in a very short period of time, we have seen a significant change in the culture, and we're not done. This is not done. So now there's an end game for sure. And the end game, aside from the leak, we really transitioned out of the leaked documents here. We're now talking about the larger soft disclosure that's happening, I think, controlled disclosure.
Well, a lot of people have wanted us to comment and talk about unidentified because it's pretty big right now. It's pretty important in what's going on. So
I think, you know, we do have to. I'm not saying don't pay attention to who the people are who are driving this narrative. I'm paying attention to who they are. You should pay attention to who they are. And you should look with a little bit of a jaundiced eye at all of us. Yes, do it. But to just keep shouting false flag, op, disinfo, like at every step of the way, I don't see how that's helpful. And I don't see how it's accurate either. You know, something else is happening here. There's a kind of disclosure. It's not going to be 100% honest. I've been saying this for at least 10 years since I wrote After Disclosure. Don't expect any disclosure to be fully honest. But that doesn't mean that, you know, you shouldn't have it, because in the context of this society, we don't have a democratic society, guys. So like, get over the idea. We don't have a truly free functioning system. Like, you know, you were told in your 6th grade civics class. That doesn't exist either. We have a very rigidly controlled hierarchy in many ways. It's financially controlled. It's politically controlled. It's controlled by the military. Now it's controlled by a surveillance state that's never going to let you go and have a minute of privacy for the rest of your life. So all of that's happening, all right? So that's the reality. And in that reality, we have a faction that is trying to push a form of UFO disclosure. That's what you got to see. And it's very obvious that they're trying to navigate their way through that.
Yes.
And it's not even clear even now that they're going to succeed, although, as one person recently said, there's a lot of toothpaste out of the tube by now. So it's not going back in. What were you about to say there?
No,
Okay.
Keep going. I'll jump in.
So that's it. That's basically all I got right now.
Okay. So yeah, that was basically it. I forget. It was something you said, but
okay. Maybe we should wrap this up.
Yeah, we should. We should. I think there were a few more things, but
there's always more.
Yeah. We can talk about it on the next show because it's 9:21.
It's a bit late.
Yeah, it is. So
I guarantee you there's going to be people at the end of this saying, oh my God, they're defending TTSA. It's like, stop it already. Like, stop it with the polarization. Like, let's listen to each other rather than start labeling. Like, it's like if you're one of those people, you're doing exactly what they're doing in the outside society right now, which is labeling people for who they are rather than what they say. So like, just don't do that. Like, don't make the problem worse. Okay. There we go. Rant over.
And I think really this is an open discussion, not a closed discussion. We really don't know what's going on, and we're all driving towards the same thing. So I don't know why we're acting like this sometimes. Like, it is a closed discussion. It has to be this way. This is an open discussion. And we're moving forward every single week with more information. And I think that's the way we have to approach this.
Yeah, like, don't be ideologically driven. Like, it's really simple. Don't fall in love with an idea. recognize that maybe you're wrong. Like maybe you're wrong sometimes, and maybe there's another way to look at things. How's that for a revelation? Okay. So like we can all learn from our mistakes. I've made more than enough in my life.
We all have.
We all try. Like when you make a mistake, you try to like look at it. It's hard. And then you think maybe there's something else. So I'm talking about the leak here. I'm not talking about TTSA. Forget them. I'm talking about this leak, which if you really are howling into the wind against this, you're going to howl yourself into irrelevancy and oblivion. Like I said earlier, like it's just going to happen. This is moving ahead without you. So understand this is a genuine leak. It doesn't mean that everything in there is exactly true. It just means that these are Davis's genuine notes about a genuine conversation he had with a very powerful man who was locked out of a deeply classified black budget special access program relating to ET technology. So that's important. We need to move that ahead. This is going to make it into the mainstream. You mark my words. This will make it into the mainstream. It will be a matter of discussion. When? I have no idea.
Yeah, that'll be a matter of time, I think.
It will be, because we have a very controlled mainstream. Absolutely. So,
yeah.
But it's going to make it, I'm predicting, because it's going to become too big to ignore.
A lot of people have been asking in the comments, you know, when and why is it not in the mainstream? And the mainstream is never going to pick this up right away. This is way too heavy for mainstream. So this is going to be down the road. Yeah, I agree. They're much more friendly to UAP, UFO than they used to be, but no, they're not. And isn't that amazing that we're saying that? They're more friendly to UAP, UFO. It's true. Look at what is happening now. You can just look up the news any day now, any day. And there's UFOs in the news, just about quite common. So when we go from this show week to week, you know, it's a great check-in to see what's going on, and it's everywhere. We wake up every morning, we're like, did something happen this time? And often something else did happen. It's really quite amazing. Yeah. But no, I mean, as far as the Wilson leak, the Davis Wilson leak making it to the mainstream, when I say it's going to happen, I believe it will, but I don't know that it's even going to happen this year. Might happen next year. It might happen the year after that. But this issue is not going away. That you can mark my words. And it will stay, and it will continue to percolate. And, you know, I think it was Grant earlier in the week said he believed that this was checkmate, but that doesn't mean it's checkmate in 1 or 2 moves. It could be a 15-move checkmate, but it's going to happen. And I do believe, I agree with him, that this particular document, its provenance is unarguable, will be unarguable, and it's going to be harder and harder to ignore. So that's my opinion. That's our opinion. There we go. Okay, so we are really going to wrap up now. So it's 9:26, and we just want to thank you all for being here. We haven't been able to see the chat tonight at all, but we know you're all here. We'd like to thank Pursuing X, thank all of you. And we will be at Alien Con in LA this weekend. If any of you are there, please drop by and say hi. That'll be crazy, but yes, we'll be there. It's the Los Angeles Convention Center. We have not done this one before. If you're in LA, go. Be there. Stop by. Say hello. We'll be happy to see you. Anything else we want to tell them? No, I'm happy to be here. Had another great day doing this with you. Yep. Great day hanging out with you guys. Hope this was interesting. And if you like what you see, hit the like button, smash it. And if you like what we do, subscribe to our channel. It's free. It's just YouTube, guys. Subscribe to the channel and get some notifications along the way, and you won't miss what we're doing. If you really like what we're doing, go to Richard Dolan Members. There's a lot of information I put up there that is not available here. And it's not just members content. There is some free content there as well. Absolutely. I'm just going to add, there's a newsletter. It's free. It's basically a summary of what we put out every week. So if you look at the subtitles, you'll see we have free content, free archives, and then we have members content, members archives. There you go. So you can see a snapshot of every single thing we're doing. But we are putting out tons of free content every week. So it's not just about members. It's about everybody. All right. All right. We're done. Hope everyone has a great night. That's right. Wishing you all a great night. Take care, everybody. Later.